Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. It is the 8th of the month of January. Of course, a little bit later after you've seen this, and by the hat, you can tell what I'm going to talk about. My Huskies are taking on the Michigan Wolverines in the national championship game at 4:30 Pacific time. So obviously hoping for good spirits with that. Really excited. A bunch of pro dogs did really well yesterday on Sunday. Jake Browning threw 3 touchdowns. Taylor Rapp caught the game-sealing interception on Sunday Night Football. Levi Onwuzurike had 2 sacks for the Lions in their win over the Minnesota Vikings. So there's some good omens. And it's funny because here in Washington, we're in the only state playing today that actually has Wolverines in it. Michigan doesn't, so I don't know what that's about. Regardless, it's raining right now here in Seattle. It's raining in Houston. So hoping for a little bit of purple rain here down in NRG Stadium for the national championship game. Regardless of that, another week in Seattle sports, some good, some not so good, some returns that just happened right before we got on the air today. So we'll start with the good, not so good here as we get straight into Seahawks news. Seattle, week 18. It's the regular season finale. They had controlled their destiny going into the last 2 weeks of the regular season. Loss to the Steelers last week changed that. The Seahawks needed to win their game against the Cardinals on the road and have the Chicago Bears beat the Green Bay Packers on the road in Lambeau. They needed both of those things to happen. There were 2 other scenarios where if certain teams tied and a bunch of stuff like that, then the Seahawks could make it. But there hasn't been a tie all season in the NFL. And after week 18, there wouldn't be. So it needed to be the wins that Seattle needed going into this final week, and Seattle did their part. The Seahawks would defeat the Arizona Cardinals by a score of 21-20. Arizona went for a last-second field goal from Matt Prater to go ahead and win as time expired, but that went wide to the right. Seattle would hold on to win, pushing their record to 9-8. This was a tough one to watch. The Cardinals had possession of this ball late into the second half, and for most of the second half to an extent as well, running the football with James Conner at will. Kyler Murray, the dangerous runner that he is with the football, was able to do damage. A lot of poor tackling. This Seahawks run defense that's ranked 30th in the NFL continued to show struggles and continued to show why it's ranked 30th in the NFL. James Conner was running through just weak arm tackles throughout the course of the day. The Seattle offense struggled as well. There were several opportunities where they were failing to cash in outside of Jason Myers' field goals. But a late touchdown from Geno to Tyler Lockett and a 2-point conversion to Tyler Lockett would give Seattle a lead and the go-ahead score as, again, they escape after Arizona had basically the game-winning field goal within grasp. It just went wide right. So we look at inactives here. This was a tough inactives list. Running back Kenny McIntosh, who unfortunately unable to really contribute throughout the course of this season, missed this finale. Linebacker Patrick O'Connell was unable to go. Both offensive tackles, Jason Peters and Abraham Lucas, were out of this game. So Seattle starting right tackle was not in. There was a lot of Stone Forsythe and Jake Curran in this game. Also offensive tackle Raekwon O'Neal. Jerron Reed was unable to go in this game as he was dealing with a bruise, and defensive end Mario Edwards. So 2 offensive tackles that would have been contributors in this game, and 2 defensive linemen who would have been contributors in this game. Jerron Reed having an excellent year with the Seahawks this season, both unable to go in the regular season finale, and certainly could have used all 4 of those guys potentially. So we look at offensive and defensive player of the game. It was an offensive explosion for Seattle, a little bit as I alluded to. The Seahawks unable to do a bunch with the football when they did have it, and having to settle for a lot of field goals in this one from Jason Myers. I went with Tyler Lockett. Tyler only 2 receptions for 71 yards and the 1 touchdown on the day. It was his first touchdown since the Commanders game at home. So I believe that was back in week 10. But Tyler Lockett, as we've talked about throughout the course of the season, has just really been such a reliable, consistent force that the Seattle offense can look to in certain moments, whether it's on third downs, whether it's in big moments. Tyler Lockett, a guy who was drafted out of Kansas State as a primary kick returner, has really turned into such an excellent option in the passing game for the Seahawks. On the defensive side of the ball, there were some choices to make here, but considering the impact and at least the eye test, I hate that word, but sometimes it rings true. Devon Witherspoon continued an excellent rookie season, 11 total tackles, 7 solo tackles, and 3 tackles for loss. Those 3 tackles for loss were big. Getting into the backfield, causing negative plays is always going to be a plus when you're looking at a defender. And Devon Witherspoon has showed that throughout the course of his rookie season. He can come down and make the big play, make big tackles, lay the wood, in addition to his coverage skills and his ability in the passing game as well. So really excited for the sort of player that he will continue to be for the Seahawks for years forward. There was, a lot of talk about Jalen Carter, and I understand that, but I really think Devon Witherspoon will be a big play contributor for this defense for years to come. So injuries during this game were tough. Linebacker Jordan Brooks left the game with an ankle injury and was deemed questionable to return. Noah Fant left the game with a hand injury. He was also questionable to return, and safety Julian Love, dealing with a hand injury as well, left the game and was questionable to return. So, all 3 of those guys are major contributors. So State Farm Stadium, home of the Arizona Cardinals, continues to be an area of struggle for the Seahawks, whether it's winning games there, the tight games there, or even the injuries there. As obviously we look back to the Legion of Boom days when Richard Sherman got injured there, Cam Chancellor got injured there, and Earl Thomas broke his leg there as well. So with the win, it feels like a loss because of what I'm about to mention. With the Seahawks win, but the Packers winning their game to become the 7th seed, Seattle was eliminated from playoff contention. Seattle does go 9-8, but they missed the playoffs. And it leaves a lot of questions, and you'll see the Pete Carroll on your screen and wonder why. Well, some of you won't wonder why, but it's going to be an interesting offseason, and I say that for a lot. But this Seahawks franchise is at a unique point because there's a lot of young talent on this roster. Don't get me wrong. I just talked at length about Devon Witherspoon. I would love to give Jordan Brooks an extension. Boye Mafe had a strong season as he racked up a bunch of sacks this year and had that sack streak. Julian Love had a big impact as a guy that a lot of people were wondering, why are we bringing in another safety? On the offensive side of the ball, DK Metcalf continues to contribute despite what some fans say about his attitude and yada, yada, yada. Kenneth Walker, when he was able to be healthy, he was a big contributor as well. He looked good in this game running the football, didn't get to 100 yards, only had 78. But the point is, there's a lot of talent on this roster, and they shouldn't have struggled as much as they did. Pete Carroll, talking on 710 today, said that they made a lot of young mistakes, and that's fine to a T. I understand that. There's a lot of young players. I just highlighted them. But also, coaching should fix that. This should not continue to be one of the top penalized teams in the NFL year after year. This isn't a new thing for Seattle, right? That run defense, I don't think that run defense being 30th in the NFL is a product of being a young team. You weren't a young team necessarily last year, and you were bad against the run as well. These are issues that continue to happen, and that's been my problem with the Pete Carroll era throughout the entirety. Do I think it would be fine if Pete Carroll is still the head coach next year? Yes, I do. I don't have a problem with that. But it's sort of the loyalty to some of the play callers, whether it's Clint Hurt. Shane Waldron had his moments this year, but could have been better as well, especially considering the struggles on third down. It's a matter of the mindset in the coaching staff. They obviously continue to foster a great culture in that locker room, and that's been a staple of Pete Carroll wherever he's gone, outside of the stint in New England that didn't last very long for other reasons. There are decisions that need to be made because this is still a Seahawks team that hasn't gotten past the divisional round since losing in Super Bowl 49. That has to change. You're in this holding pattern where you do good throughout the course of the regular season, but not good enough to get a higher seed. So you end up having to go through the wild card. You lost in the wild card last year to the 49ers, and that game really wasn't that competitive. You didn't make the playoffs before that. So something needs to change. Pete Carroll says he needs to be better in his post-game press conference. He said that this morning. Yeah, that's fine. But you've been saying that for years throughout the course of the season in post-game press conferences. You said you needed to be better. He took that ownership. That's fine. But when I'm hearing it again and again, why isn't there that improvement? So it's an issue. I understand it. We'll look at it deeper. We'll look at it throughout the course of this offseason as we look ahead to the NFL draft and free agency as well. Seattle had another good draft this year. I know I didn't necessarily mention him by name, but Jackson Smith and Jigba had a solid season despite what some thought Seattle wasn't using him right. He is the third wide receiver on the depth chart. He wasn't going to be highlighted as the top guy all the time. Didn't make sense for that, so I understand. To Pete Carroll's point, there are some young players on this team. Yes, that's true. But, I'm not putting all of the fact that Seattle was the 30th run defense. I'm going to keep talking about it because it was hard to watch. I'm not putting all of the fact that Seattle was the 30th run defense in the NFL on the young players. There are still other established players. So, yeah, it's frustrating. It's really frustrating considering you see the talent level of some of these players and you see the games that they're losing, the types of games that they're losing, and realize that they should have been better. They controlled their own destiny 2 weeks ago, and now we're here. The regular season's over. They're headed home. Soon they'll officially get their list. They haven't posted it yet, as I'm making sure. I don't say that, and then it happens. Nope, didn't happen. So, it's they'll put out their list for the future and reserve rosters for this offseason. Bunch of practice squad guys and guys that they'll eventually bring back. Changes need to be made. I don't know what that looks like, but there are a few things this offseason that, at least in my mind, make sense. You got to bring back Jordan Brooks. You got to bring back Leonard Williams. Those two should be no-brainers relatively. Any thought of trading DK Metcalf is ludicrous, and anybody saying that shouldn't be listened to or taken seriously. For a guy that continues to contribute, only the third player in NFL history that had 50-plus receptions, 900-plus yards, and 5+ TDs in all of his first 5 seasons, joining A.J. Green and Randy Moss. I wouldn't listen to anybody talking about that. Watching the game yesterday, there isn't anybody else on the field on offense that celebrates more when a teammate scores other than DK Metcalf. I get it. I understand some of the penalties are bad. I understand that. But there are some players where you have to accept the risk with the reward. I am more than willing to accept that with DK Metcalf. So we'll move past that. You ideally will draft a quarterback in this upcoming draft. While a lot of people had struggles and ill will towards Geno Smith this season, I think Geno's fine. I think we know what Geno Smith is. He is an acceptable option at the quarterback position. And that was what reflected in the contract he got after last season, right? It wasn't a big superstar contract. It was, you did well, comeback player of the year. You are doing what we need you to do with this offense. I don't think a lot of the blame should be put on Geno. I'm putting it more on the defensive side of the football and the coaching staff. So Jordan Brooks, Leonard Williams, keep DK. Don't think dumb thoughts about that. But you do need to potentially add on the defensive line, mostly up in the nose tackle spot, to shore that up. Or maybe it's a change in thought on the defensive side of the ball with the play calling, because some of the schemes and the formations that we see from this defense are questionable, and especially when it's bad throughout the course of the year defending the run. So, yes, as I mentioned, the team eliminated from postseason contention. Looking ahead, as I mentioned, it's a big offseason. So likely by the time that we see you next week, we will know about futures and reserved contracts that the team will sign. There will be a few decisions to make, because before the game against the Cardinals, we found out that Pete Carroll's contract lasts through the 2024 season and has a team option for 2025. And there was talk, the word retirement was thrown around. So we'll see about that with Pete Carroll. Going off of his comments today, it doesn't sound like retirement's a thing. He does say he intends to coach the Seahawks next season, and I'd be fine with that personally, but obviously a decision, some changes need to be made, and action needs to be taken as opposed to talking about it. So we'll lead into that. We'll start. It's that time of the year where we start to look at mock drafts and look at free agents and situations like that. So regardless, we move over here to the Mariners. And there was some action over the course of the past week, and all that action came on the same day. So we'll look at it. There were 2 trades made on January 5th. The first of the 2 being the Mariners sent left-handed pitcher Robbie Ray to the San Francisco Giants in exchange for outfielder Mitch Haniger and right-handed pitcher Anthony DeSclafani. Sclafani. Sorry, it's a tough spelling. And the Mariners did get $6 million in cash considerations back. It was originally thought to be $3 million. It is actually $6 million. In return, as I mentioned, yes, Robbie Ray heads to San Francisco. This is an interesting trade. I was really looking forward to Robbie Ray bouncing back this season after coming off of Tommy John surgery. The expected return date for him was supposed to be around the All-Star break next season. He doesn't get to do that. The Mariners send him off to San Francisco. San Francisco adds another strong arm. The Mariners get back Mitch Haniger, a name that they're familiar with, a guy who's a really strong hitter when he's healthy. But for a lot of fans, the worry is of when he's healthy. So that'll be interesting as well. DeSclafani, Jerry Dipoto had a meeting with the local media later that day and said that he projects as the 6th starter currently and will likely work in a swing start and long relief capacity out of the bullpen. So I'm fine with that. And the cash considerations continue, considering how money is working within this organization throughout this offseason. I'm fine with that. But it's an interesting deal to look at. Here's a look at Mitch Haniger in a Mariners uniform, as we've obviously seen him before in this photo taken by Live Lions. I'm fine with that deal. We'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. But we also look at, there was a second deal that day. The Mariners traded infielder Jose Caballero to the Tampa Bay Rays in exchange for outfielder / first baseman Luke Raley. That is a 1-for-1 deal. The Mariners add Luke Raley, a guy who can play every outfield spot if needed to. They also played first base this past season for the Rays, had a really strong year offensively at the plate, a career year, has some power. And the Mariners send over Caballero, who was kind of an older rookie, considering how much time he's spent in the minor league system for Seattle. Really pesky, solid infielder, but nothing more than that. It's interesting to see the Rays media talk about how he is an elite infielder, and that's just not the case. But we'll look back. This trade makes a little bit of sense. I mean, you were struggling on the outfielder part. Your outfielders outside of Julio Rodriguez before this day were going to be Cade Marlowe, Taylor Trammell, Zach DeLoach, and those guys are fine. But if you want to compete, with the Astros and the Rangers, you're going to need to do better than that. And Luke Raley is better than that. So that's a strong addition. Kind of surprised that Dipoto was able to make the 1-for-1 trade with the Rays, sending Caballero over. And we look at this trade with the Giants, to get Mitch Haniger back is fine. If you're able to keep him healthy, that's a strong addition, and I'm happy with that. The plan for him is to largely play right field as long as his body allows, per Dipoto. Dipoto said he did speak with Haniger that day and that told him that when he's healthy, in 2021, 21, he had 39 home runs and he was hitting about 250. So, if you're able to keep him healthy, that is a strong option. That's a big if, though, as we know with him and his injury history. But regardless, I'm happy with that. Robbie Ray, I was really hoping for the bounce back. I thought he got a lot of an unfair shake from Mariners fans. A lot of fans thought that, he wasn't coming in advertised. And I think a lot of them expected him to be exactly the Cy Young he was after when the Mariners signed him in free agency after his great year with the Toronto Blue Jays. But that was an unrealistic expectation. He ate a bunch of innings. He was really strong, especially in the second half of the year. And the Mariners don't make the playoffs without Robbie Ray in 2022. Everybody's going to remember the home run that Yordan Alvarez hit, but you have to understand some of the context of his impact to bring the Mariners to that point in the first place. So That's all we've got for the Mariners. There are 34 days until spring training officially kicks off and 81 days until opening day on March 28th. So obviously counting down both of them. I do have those listed for a reason. But that's all we've got when it comes to the Mariners. We haven't had much at all to go off of when it comes to Sounders related news, but that changed also on January 5th. It was a busy day in the Seattle sports world as the Sounders, free agency in the offseason. There are moves that are rumored to be finalized and getting finalized, but until we get an official word, I don't want to bring anything fake. So we'll talk about the rumors in a minute, but we'll get to the official finalized stuff here to begin with. On the 5th, the club signed center back Nathan Cardoso, who primarily goes by Nathan, to a deal. The 6'2", 28-year-old defender from Brazil previously spent the 2021 and 22 seasons playing with the San Jose Earthquakes. He had really strong seasons there with the Earthquakes, but he did miss this past year of 2023 with an ACL injury that he suffered in the preseason. So tough there, but this is an interesting signing because at the end of season press conference, Craig Weibel said that the club really wasn't going to mess with the defense and primarily look at adding attackers. But this is more than likely a depth signing. As I mentioned, 28 years old, spent 3 seasons with the Earthquakes, missed last year. He's now apparently fully healed from that injury and should be a full participant as preseason opens here in 4 days on the 12th. So it's interesting. There was some thought that maybe his injury history and his salary, he was earning $700,000 back in 2023, was enough to scare him off. He didn't at all get selected in the re-entry draft. He was made a free agent, but when he was healthy with the Earthquakes, he was a regular starter. He was among the league leaders in tackles and interceptions, very effective playing the ball in the air, as well as moving the ball up in 2022. So this really projects as a third center back, maybe pushing Jackson Reagan and Yeimar Gomez Andrade as a third center back, but also considering the fact that we talked about it when the end of the season press conference happened, Weibel had said that they didn't plan on moving Javier Arriaga at all, even though teams had inquired, and that might change with the signing of Nathan. So it'll be interesting to see if a deal is made. I know Austin FC has inquired about Javier Arriaga. So as I mentioned, it'll be interesting to see what this signing does change. But yeah, projects as a third starter, third center back. I'm not mad at it. It's always good to have depth. You never know when injuries going to happen. Seattle was uncharacteristically healthy at the center back position, knock on wood, this past year. So I'm happy with it. I just wonder where the fallout will go with Javier Arriaga following that deal. In addition to that news on the 5th of the signing, there were 3 Sounders players called into international duty. The first 2 both going to the U.S. men's national team. 2 younger players, not the players that you're traditionally used to seeing go to the U.S. men's national team. Defender Jackson Reagan, as I just talked about, the 25-year-old, earned his first call-up to the U.S. men's national team as the Sounders FC Academy product joins midfielder Josh Atencio for January camp and a Slovenian friendly. Reagan helped anchor the Seattle backline, as you'll remember, this past season that was tied for the fewest goals allowed in MLS. So that'll be exciting for him to join that national team. Josh Atencio, as I mentioned, the 21-year-old midfielder, called up. He was called up back in November for the U.S. Olympic men's team and previously represented the U.S. at the U15 and U17 levels, making 10 youth national team appearances since the year of 2017. So those 2 will be with the team for this January camp as they're set to face Slovenia on January 20th at Toyota Field in San Antonio, Texas at 12 p.m. Pacific time. You can watch that if you're so compelled on TNT Max and Peacock. So very nice for those 2 players to get that recognition. And then the third player from the Sounders called up in international duty, Nuhu for Cameroon. The 26-year-old has 28 career caps for Cameroon since the year of 2018, playing every minute in all 3 of Cameroon's 22 FIFA World Cup matches, including the country's historic 1-0 win over the country of Brazil. He is set to play a friendly against Zambia on January 9th, which is tomorrow, before it stops AFCON play. So that will begin Group C action on January 15th against Guinea before facing Senegal on January 19th and Gambia back on January 23rd. So some action there as Nuhu goes for a friendly tomorrow, and then 3 different Group C action games throughout the course of January. So it doesn't sound like he's going to be able to participate, in the traditional January camp that the Sounders would have for preseason. So very exciting for those players with the offseason. As I mentioned, there are some rumors regarding the Sounders and potential signings. We talked about Pedro de la Vega for weeks now, it feels like, maybe even months. The signing is rumored to be in its finalizing stages. The transfer fee is set at about $7 million, and there is a transfer fee of 30% if the Sounders do sell Pedro de la Vega further. So those are rumors. That's nothing officialized. But wanted to put that on your radar as we will likely talk about that next week. So we'll see. I said that, the rumors were that it was finalizing in the coming days, like a week ago. So we'll see. Moving into Kraken hockey after the big, exciting week that was the Winter Classic and all the events that took place, whether it was the refurbishing of the Verlo playfield in Tacoma, whether it was, the fan village in the north lot of Lumen Field, there was practice day, the food tasting, all of that. There's only one game that the Kraken played last week, starting on January 4th against the Ottawa Senators, to wrap up a little 3-game home stretch. And I would say home stretch with air quotes, because obviously the middle of that home stretch was at T-Mobile Park for the Winter Classic. But regardless, the Kraken take care of business. They defeated the Ottawa Senators by a score of 4-1. Seattle scored the first 3 goals unanswered as Joey Decord continued his strong performance in net. Ottawa did get a goal in the third period. They put on the extra attacker in exchange for pulling the goalie. Vince Dunn scores the empty net goal, and Seattle pushes their winning streak to 6 games and their point streak to 10 games. Really nice to see this team finally start to roll. As I mentioned, with Joey Decord's strong play in this game, he is our player of the game. Not only that, he's in our photo of the game, taken by Rio Giancarlo. 32 saves on the night for Joey against his former team, a .970 save percentage, and 2.23 goal save above expected. He continues to be absolutely ridiculous in net for Seattle, holding things down as goaltender Philip Grubauer continues to work back from an injury, and just looks really solid. Normally, we'd have a player of the week, but considering there was only one game, it doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to do that. But no, I mean, we look at this game. Ottawa has a lot of talent, whether it's Claude Giroux, is it Matthew Tkachuk? No, it's Brady Tkachuk. I apologize. There's, you got to keep track of the Tkachuks around here. Brady Tkachuk, there's a lot of talent on that Ottawa roster, and Seattle easily could have lulled at stuff. But Dave Hackstall on practice the day before and morning skate the morning of kind of made it clear that this team is, ready. They have to come out every night. They were expecting a strong battle from Ottawa, considering the talent that they have on that roster. And they looked ready from the jump. Yanni Gourde scored a goal in back-to-back games. He opened the scoring in this one. So, Andre Burakovsky scored. Tomas Tatar scored as well. Andre scores his first goal of the year. So you're continuing to see that depth from this Kraken roster. I talked about it with the Winter Classic. We talked about it on Back to Base, so we recapped the Winter Classic. So, you're looking at this Kraken team and, you're seeing the strong, structured defensive play, and that did help them last season. But last season, they were outscoring teams. They were running up the score. They were basically just imposing their will on the offensive side of the ice. And that's not the case with this year's team, but they're still showing that same sort of depth and that grit that made them a playoff team last season. So feeling good about it. We talked about it for weeks here on Circling Seattle Sports on Converge. There were cries from the fan base to make a big move, fire Dave Hackstall, trade a player, to really shake things up. And because of the losing streak, and at the height of that 8-game losing streak, I thought about it. I will admit I was so strong against it for the longest time, but I thought, hey, things are going poorly. Maybe they do need to change something. And then they broke through against the Florida Panthers. They beat Florida. Florida's still a great team after going to the Stanley Cup Finals, second in the Atlantic Division right now, behind only the Boston Bruins. And they've been on that point streak ever since. They're on a 6-game winning streak. They would have moved up higher in the division, but the Edmonton Oilers are currently on a 7-game winning streak. If we look here, I want to look at the wild card standings, but Seattle is right on the door of a wild card spot. Yeah, they're right on the door. Edmonton and St. Louis are there, and then Nashville is 4 points ahead of Seattle. But the point is, you've dragged yourself from that lower point that you were in, and you're playing strong hockey. You know, you're getting guys back from the injuries that they suffered. Jaden Schwartz will be traveling with the team, and over the past week since we've seen you, has been given the day-to-day designation. He's not been activated off IR on the NHL media site, but. And speaking of that, Riker Evans was called up today earlier this morning, right as we were getting ready to start filming. Riker Evans was recalled from the AHL Coachella Valley Firebirds. There was kind of thought of why was he being sent back down ahead of the Winter Classic. But to be fair, Coachella Valley did have a few games quickly around the time that the Winter Classic was happening, so it was good for them. For the Firebirds and for Riker Evans to get that game action while Seattle's kind of have this, kind of quiet point. So Riker Evans actually did play in the 2 games that Coachella Valley played over this past weekend, beating the Abbotsford Canucks in back-to-back games. So not bad for him to continue to get game action because he had been a healthy scratch in the last game that the Kraken had played against the Philadelphia Flyers ahead of the Winter Classic. So good to get him game action and keep him in a rhythm. But yeah, no, I feel good about it where the Kraken sit, whether it's how strong they've played structured defensively, getting the impact scoring from different players. And they're doing this win streak right now. They're on this point streak without guys like Jared McCann scoring at a hot clip. Matty Benier is scoring at ridiculous points. You know what I mean? So feeling good about that and where they're headed, especially with Riker Evans coming back. It sounds like Jaden Schwartz will be able to be active at some point during this road trip. Philip Grubauer has been ramping up his work in practices, not been with the team yet in team practice sessions, but has seemed to be ramping things up. So feeling good about that. Also feeling good about the fact that we found out who the Kraken will see represented in the All-Star game this past week. Oliver Bjorkstrand, forward Oliver Bjorkstrand, will be representing the Kraken in this year's 2024 All-Star game in Toronto. It is the first time that Bjorkstrand has been named to the All-Star game. He is the second leading scorer on the Kraken, right behind Vince Dunn, top scoring forward for the Kraken as well. So really great to see Bjorky get nominated for this and be given this sort of honor just because he's been a really underrated player for a good amount of the course of his career. He did recently play in his 500th career game that came against the Flyers, actually. Just a really strong player in a lot of different aspects. He does become the second Danish player ever to represent his team at the All-Star game. And it's funny when I say that because the other player who did so, and we'll get that here for you in a second, actually is a scout now with the Kraken. So again, just a really strong honor for him to be picked. I kind of thought it was going to be Vince Dunn, just considering the point production. But as you can see on the bottom of your screen, fan voting is currently active. It is open for now, and it opened on the 4th until January 11th. So you've got a couple more days. If you follow the instructions on the reader on the bottom of your screen, tweeting Vince Dunn, hashtag NHL All-Star Vote, and Joey Decord, hashtag NHL All-Star Vote, you will help the cause for both of those guys. Joey's played really excellent, is a big reason behind this team's current push. In addition to that fact, we look at Vince Dunn being the top point producer for the Kraken, continues to be an offensive producer for this team. Defensively, he's had better games throughout the course of the year, but still a strong producer for the Kraken. And, it would be good to see him get honored as well. So, yeah, we'll get a look at this here yet. Bjorkstrand becomes the second ever Danish player named to the All-Star game. Yes. So very nice for Bjorky to get that honor. I will continue to run that banner on the bottom of the screen so you can know how to vote for other Kraken players to send them to this year's All-Star game in Toronto. So we look at that. The Kraken sit at a 16-win, 14-loss, 9 overtime loss record. They are 5th in the Pacific Division, tied with the Edmonton Oilers at 41 points in the standings. But because Edmonton holds the tiebreaker of the head-to-head wins, Edmonton has the higher spot in the division. So, as I mentioned, they're tied with 2 other teams for that last wildcard spot. So continue to make progress and you'll feel good. That can all start tomorrow, January 9th at the Buffalo Sabres. That's a 4 p.m. puck drop. All 3 of the games that the Kraken play this week are on Root Sports, and they're all 4 o'clock puck drops, which is nice to have consistency. They do practice today. I don't know if we'll hear a bunch of news out of that practice, but there is that game on the 9th, Tuesday the 9th. Then 2 days later, they will head to the nation's capital to play the Washington Capitals on January 11th. As I mentioned, a 4 p.m. start time on that one. And then 2 days later, they'll head up to Columbus, a Columbus team that surprised some folks with how well they've been doing this season. January 13th at the Columbus Blue Jackets is also a 4 p.m. Pacific time puck drop. These teams don't have the best records per se. These first 3 of this 6-game road trip that the Kraken will be going on over the course of the next 2 weeks. But, you don't want to fall behind. There's a lot of talent on Buffalo, on Washington, and on Columbus as well. So that's all we've got for this week's episode of Circling Seattle Sports on Converge Media. The Seahawks wrap up their season missing the playoffs. Unfortunately, we'll look at a ton of things that the Seahawks have to look forward to this offseason as over the course of the next few weeks, I apologize. The Mariners make 2 big trades, and it's rumored that they are still interested in a few free agent bats. They likely need to add another bat, at least to this lineup, to truly be a competitive team against the Rangers, against the Astros this upcoming season. And as I mentioned, we're getting closer and closer to pitchers and catchers reporting. So looking forward to that, obviously. The Sounders will need to make the Nathan move official, but by the time that we see you next week on the 15th, there will likely be a few other moves that we'll be able to look forward to and announce to you as well. We look at the Kraken. They continue their point streak. They continue their winning streak as well, and we'll look to keep both of those up when they start to get back to game action tomorrow against the Buffalo Sabres. So until we see you next week, take care of yourselves, be well, do whatever you can to make today a great day. And of course, above all else with this Monday, go Dogs.